Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of everyone's favorite, whatever this technically is, the Cave Hour. Because sometimes life can be a little bit lifey, and it's way cool to just get away from it all and hang out in a cave for a little while. Not one episode has gone for an hour. I've yet to find a way to justify why it's actually called the Cave Hour. But anyways, if this is your first time tuning into this shit show, it's pretty much just me hanging out in a cave, talking about cave stuff. Not really. Talking about life stuff. But the cave is a safe place. It's technically still part. It's like within life. I'm alive. Man, I should really find like a better way to explain. You'll pick it up. It's fine. But there are two number one rules that you need to know. First of which is there's no judging in the cave, which I made an addendum to that last week where you can judge stuff outside of the cave, stuff that's far away, but there's no judging within the cave. And the other number one rule is that whatever happens in the cave stays in the cave, except I do record it all and share it with everyone publicly, so there's that. And now it's time for me to think up a topic to talk about to myself for a while, for you to listen to for whatever reason you seem to be doing that right now. So I guess, the question that I asked myself is what have I brought with me to the cave? What emotional or other kind of baggage have I dragged? Like what have I run from? And why am I hiding? Like, what am I hiding from here in this cave? Because as much as I approach this with, a kind of detachment and irony, it is actually a pretty good exercise to think about in terms of like being mindful or like a kind of meditation maybe, especially with how fast everything fucking moves these days with like living our lives on the internet. Like if you're watching this, you probably spend too much time on the internet or behind a screen in general somehow, which again is not a judgment, but if you give yourself a safe space, whether you literally travel to a cave like I have, and you're really actually definitely sitting in a real cave while you think about it, or even if you just imagine, or just give yourself some space or time at some point throughout like the week or whatever to just like take stock of how existentially fucking terrifying your life is all the time, but in a place that's like safe to do so, because life can demand of you very constantly and very aggressively sometimes just a constant like forward movement, and the opportunity to reflect and take stock, like I said, might never naturally present itself, and it is work these days to give yourself that opportunity. So maybe that's why I'm doing this. I don't know. I just decided to hang out in the cave. I don't know. What do you want from me? I uploaded a video quite some time ago now called Little Fat Mental Boy's Health, I think, and the thumbnail was a drawing of the Doctor from Dead by Daylight that I did in Microsoft Paint. I haven't watched that video pretty much since it came out, I don't think, but from what I can remember of that video, I was talking about mental health because I, at the time, went to my doctor to talk about depression, who then referred me to a psychologist, who then, I think, I ended up talking to a psychiatrist at one point, it was all during COVID lockdown, so it was telehealth for the psychiatrist. The psychologist was in person, the doctor was in person. But being this far removed from it now, I can reflect on it maybe a little differently than I could at the time. Because I was talking to someone from my family today about how crazy, stupid, easy it is to be diagnosed by a doctor with depression. In my case, I was feeling depressed. I went to my doctor and I filled out a questionnaire, like a survey. It was the kind of survey where it's like strongly agree, strongly disagree, and like options in the middle, right? And it's sort of trying to gauge how frequently you feel negative feelings and how strongly those negative feelings are affecting you in your day-to-day life. So on kind of a common sense level, it makes sense, but to then take just that survey, as well as I guess the doctor's kind of in-person assessment in one session, mind you, actually, or maybe two, I can't really remember, but you just got to kind of like sound a bit sad and look a bit sunken in, look a bit down, and then bada bing bada boom, there you go, you've got a prescription for antidepressants as well as a diagnosis from a doctor that you have depression. And I feel like this is a good point at which to clarify that I'm not a professional, I'm not a mental health professional, I'm not a doctor, I am but a simple man in a cave. So take anything that I say here about this sort of shit with a grain of salt, please. This is just, my personal opinion and ramblings. But to me, that seems kind of crazy. I don't know, that you can just walk in and be like, oh, yeah, cool, I have depression now. Which I think for me personally, even the idea of someone having depression and using that kind of grammar to describe what they're experiencing can be damaging in and of itself. In terms of gaining access to antidepressants or medication in general for that sort of thing, as well as getting discounted or free psychology sessions. That's a thing here where I live. If you are diagnosed by a doctor with depression, they can refer you to a psychologist and you get free or discounted psychology sessions. You get a certain amount per year. So in that sense, the diagnosis, quote unquote, is a means to an end. It's a means to gain access to help that you can have researched prior and decided that would be helpful to you. And you work with your doctor to gain access to that help via a diagnosis. That's sort of what I went through. But when it comes to explaining to people around you, friends, family, stuff like that, using the grammar to suggest that you have depression, or I shouldn't say you, for me, I found it very difficult to explain, to separate myself from that diagnosis to an extent. Even to people as close to me as my parents, it's difficult to say, to help them understand, especially being sort of a generation removed from, or a generation or two removed from understanding mental health as it is talked about today, that even if it's not some kind of chemical mental health, like mental illness or whatever you want to call it, it could be an existential issue that I'm having, and I'm using the diagnosis to get help with an existential issue via, to be able to talk to somebody who can more actively help me with that, like a psychologist, for instance. It can be difficult to get people to not think of you as someone who has some illness or ailment or disease even, or something like that. Admittedly, I didn't have the language then that I have now to be able to talk about it as concisely and clearly. To even describe it upon reflection as using the diagnosis as a means to an end, that wasn't something that I had fully thought out at the time. I mean, when you go and talk to a doctor or a psychologist, they kind of inherently have this air of authority. If you talk to a doctor who tells you you have depression, even if you don't want to subscribe to that or confidently don't believe that, I think you're still existing in a system where someone with genuine authority on the subject, who is, went to school for way longer than, they're just way smarter than you on the subject. There's going to be part of you, I would hope, that's going to at least try on what they're saying and see if it fits. But in terms of how you go about trying it on and seeing how it fits in different ways, that's pretty much something to which you're entirely left to do on your own, especially if you don't speak to a psychologist or some sort of mental health worker or professional. But even if you do speak to someone, it can depend entirely on their approach to psychology and mental health, which for me, the psychologist to whom I spoke for quite some time. I was always kind of just a little frustrated and confused as to why they weren't really helping, and it's hard to know at what point to cut that off. Like is this helping, or does it just take time to help? It doesn't feel like it's helping right now, but maybe it will. Are they suggesting the wrong things, or am I not adapting effectively enough to what they're suggesting to improve myself and be happier? For me, I can say now that I definitely needed to deal more with the existential side of depression than any kind of practical, kind of more traditional psychology approach. But depending on why you're there and the severity of the symptoms or the issue of origin, I think it's something that everyone will find works differently for them. Which was actually kind of something that came up today in my conversation with my family member and their partner. My family member was reflecting on people that they knew who were older, whether in their 40s or even 60s and 70s, who still take antidepressants and just swear by them and are never going to be off them. My family member was kind of taken aback by this. It didn't sit right with her, and she was wondering when at what point does it stop? At what point do you figure out the issue and can therefore stop taking the medication? And her partner talked about a family member of theirs who was very much older, 60s and 70s, and is definitely going to be taking the medication until the end of their life, basically, because it works for them and they swear by it. So you can kind of pick up where I'm coming from so far, in that I think I kind of align closer to my family members' way of thinking about it, at least for myself. So I can understand how for someone else they might really identify with depression or any kind of anxiety disorder or anything like that as an ailment to which the cure or mediation is medication. But that description is not one that sits well with me for myself. Not because I have anything against it, it just doesn't feel accurate. Now, that said, if when I went to the doctor originally to be diagnosed with depression, if he had have referred me to someone who could have scanned my brain or taken a blood test or something that could reveal to me in empirical form, in concrete data, that the chemicals in my brain were definitely imbalanced or lacking in some way, a way that medication was designed to aid, then I would completely change my mind. It would be pretty clear as day at that point that it was closer to a disease of some kind. But that never happened, and all the while I was frustratedly chipping away at the idea and just stubbornly sticking to the framework that there is some way to reach the core of this issue and undergo some great epiphany and self-discovery that was going to crack the case wide open. It's going to reveal I'm going to know what all my problems are. It's going to make them real. I'll be able to externalize them from myself. I'll be able to set goals and tackle them. I wouldn't feel so overwhelmed with issues and these heavy, dark emotions. I'd be able to just take back control of my life. And while I won't be going into great detail, or maybe even any detail, about what it was specifically that I was dealing with at the time that was sort of closely related to, or maybe even just the direct cause of the depression that I felt, I will say that eventually, after, about 3 years of chipping away at it and just self-reflecting and trying to philosophize and intellectualize my way through it, I did eventually find a strategy that it was pretty much a great epiphany that undid the entire case. And I just want to make clear at this point that none of what I am saying here is supposed to be anti-doctor, anti-psychology, or medication, or anything like that. It's just that those things weren't a great fit for me personally, but I will say that the process of elimination and trying them on was definitely an important part of the journey that I took to get where I am today, which is, in a cave. So if you're going to take mental health advice from anyone, maybe I might not be the one. And I will also say that the grand epiphany or strategy that I figured out was not figured out on my own. It was through talking about it, specifically to friends and a counselor. And you know what? I think I'm going to call it there. I think this is sort of on the shorter side, maybe, for the cave hour, but it was a pretty heavy subject and kind of densely packed, I felt. So that's gonna pretty much do it. All that's left to do now is sing our outro song that is the same every time because it never changes. It's always the same song. I'm so happy to be in this fucking cave. It's lit, only it's not lit. It's actually really dark. Did you see what I did there? Yeah, baby. It's so cool here in the cave. It's the best place to be with all my friends. Only I don't have any friends in here. It's just me alone in the dark with my thoughts. That's why the topic was so depressing today. The cave hour. Yeah.